Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our 5th virtual Noir at the Bar. I'm Vic Watson, the host of Newcastle and Harrogate, Noir at the Bar usually, but here we are in your living room. Terrifying. Okay, before we get really stuck into tonight's Noir at the Bar, I'd like to raise a glass to Sheila Quigley, who passed away last Friday. Sheila was a friend and mentor to many in the crime writing community, as well as a big advocate for libraries and literacy. Sheila was one of our first readers at the very first Noir at the Bar in Newcastle, almost 4 years ago, along with fellow femme fatales Danielle Ramsey and Eileen Morton. I'd like to pass our condolences to Sheila's family and thank Sheila for all the support she's provided to many of us over the years. So everybody please raise a glass to Sheila. Thank you. Okay, so on with it. Tonight we have readings from Alan Jones, Ashley Erwin, Lesley Kelly, Robert Scragg, Zoe Sharp, Kirsten McKenzie, Karen Murdarasi, Derek Farrell, Lucy Atkins, and Ros Watkins. So we've got another stellar lineup tonight for you. As you know, we usually have audience participation in the bar. Tonight is no exception. Please give me a drum roll if you can. And also if you hear something really impressive, I would like to hear you woo! And there are plenty of impressive things going to be going on tonight. From its beginning in Philadelphia 12 years ago with Peter Rozovsky, Noir at the Bar has taken over bars all over the world. Every year, before Newcastle Noir kicks off officially, we run a Noir at the Bar as part of Newcastle Noir's Fringe, and 2020 is no exception, albeit in a very different format. Last year, we hosted writers from the UK, Germany, Iceland, and America. And tonight, we have some of those readers with us again, as well as a very special guest all the way from New Zealand. And I really, really hope that you're going, woo, right now, because I'm still amazed that anybody is up to do this at 6:25 in the morning. I'm just saying. If you'd like to talk about us on social media tonight, please use the hashtag VNATB. If you would like to be entered into our prize draw for a free book, please email vnatb20@gmail.com with the subject heading enter. I'll keep posting that in the chat every so often, but yeah, it's up there for you to remember as well. If you would like to use the chat facility, loads of you already are, and that's lovely. We have the very able Nikki Black on hand to kick any of you out if you're troublemaking, so you've been warned. And you have also got the Q&A button around about here on my screen. I don't know if it's there for you. Please do feel free to post some questions for our writers tonight, and I will endeavour to ask them. Due to the limited number of spaces, if you leave tonight's gathering, you may not be able to get back in. Hopefully we are hoping to change that. We had lots of very generous donations to this website address last week. If you can, we're aware that not everybody can, please do donate something to help us buy a bigger bar. Anyway, that's enough of that. Pour yourselves a drink. Last year, I think, was it Ashley and Derek? And maybe Neil Broadfoot? His name keeps cropping up a lot when people are hungover, doesn't it? Just saying. Got into a bit of trouble after the Noir at the Bar Newcastle Noir Fringe. So let's see if that's going to happen again tonight. I'm fairly sure it will. On with the show. So the hat is still with us, and I'm right. First up tonight, Alan Jones. Round of applause, please, everybody. Alan Jones is a mixed practiced vet in a small coastal town in Scotland, and because he's not sure that all of his customers would appreciate him writing very gritty crime stories, he hides behind a pen name until he can give up the day job. I will just tell you that Alan is actually going out to work later on this evening, so he's actually joined us, but is then going to have to go out and look after some animals, I guess is what vets do. In his late 50s, but definitely with a painting in the attic, Alan has 4 grown-up children and 3 wonderful grandchildren. In his spare time, he reads, cooks, makes furniture, sails, writes books, and occasionally plays football. He's also one of the coxswains on his local lifeboat. I have a question. Alan, where'd you get the time? Just asking. After starting writing at 40, Alan has self-published 3 character-driven crime novels, which pack a bit of an emotional punch, he's been told. They are The Cabinet Maker, Blue Wicket, and Block, with a Q. Alan was one of the first self-published authors to be given a panel at Bloody Scotland, chaired by the wonderful Sharon Bairden, and he shared the panel with the brilliant David Vidichet and Alison Bailey. He's also turned out for the Scotland team in the annual Bloody Scotland match. So, without further ado, everybody, please welcome Alan Jones.
Hi, can you hear me, Vic? Hi, I'm Alan Jones, and I'd like to read to you from my third crime story block tonight. Just before we do that, I'd like to say that Mr. Scragg, who'll be reading later, kind of half finished my football career at one of the Bloody Scotland games, so I'm not going to hold him responsible for that, but just bear that in mind. So I'm going to read a little bit of the prologue just for context, and then I'll go on to chapter 1 because I want to introduce you to the main character, Bill. Prologue. At a funeral, it was nothing much. Only 4 people were present. One of them was dead, and none of the others gave a fuck. And there were 1 or 2 omissions from the service. Flowers, music, mourners, a priest, I know, a coffin. The body was badly wrapped in a polythene sheet, the kind used as a damp-proof membrane by builders, laid under concrete floors. From the size of the feet sticking out of one end and the sad straggle of matted blonde hair at the other, you would have probably guessed it was a young woman. Bill Ingram tried to ring his daughter's mobile just before he left the house at 6 o'clock to see if her train was running on time, but her voicemail message told him that her number was unavailable. She must be in a tunnel or something, he thought. He headed for the station, always a stickler for leaving in plenty time to spare, especially when meeting Carol. Everything was ready, so there was no point in hanging around the house. She'd sent him a text around about the beginning of December, informing him that she was travelling up from London on Christmas Eve and giving him the time her train was due in. He parked at the multi-storey in Mitchell Street and strolled the short distance to Central Station. It had a real Christmas buzz about it, with families being reunited, last-minute shoppers laden with bags rushing for trains, and revellers heading home after boozy office Christmas parties. Even the obligatory policemen looked quite cheery, as if they expected the seasonal goodwill to moderate the drunken carnage they'd normally have to deal with on a Friday night. He was nearly half an hour early, and on checking the arrival board, he saw that Carol's train was 10 minutes late. So he decided to nip in for a coffee. He watched the flow of passengers to and from the trains as he waited for the late arrival of the 1423 from Euston. He was back at the arrivals board 5 minutes before the train glided in, marvelling as he always did at the effortless elegance of such a mechanical leviathan coming to rest so gracefully. He scanned the platform as all the doors simultaneously opened, spilling their human cargo. A river of faces flooded towards him. At first, he watched only with interest, observing the usual rich tapestry of humankind, knowing that he wouldn't miss her or she him. But as the mass of people dwindled, a prickling anxiety crept up on him, and when the last few stragglers walked down the platform without her appearing, he turned around to see if he'd somehow missed her. As the concourse emptied of its recent influx, the number of passengers milling around thinned out to a few solitary souls. If she'd been here, he would have spotted her. He checked both exits and turned back to the platform. He tried her mobile phone again, but she didn't answer. He realised that he had a landing number on his mobile, and he stood in the centre of the almost deserted station and tried it. Her voice answered, but it had a hollow echo that identified it as a recording on her answering machine. He waited until the long tone had sounded and left a message telling her to contact him as soon as she got in. He asked one of the Network Rail employees, standing talking to the train's driver, if he could check the train to see if his daughter had fallen asleep on it. He felt stupid even asking, but when the man told him to go ahead, he hurried up the platform, peering through each window as he did for any sign of her. The guard had just stepped down from the rear of the train when Bill reached the last carriage, and he asked him if he'd lost something. "My daughter," said Bill. "She was supposed to be on the train. I wondered if she'd fallen asleep." The guard looked at him sceptically. "There's definitely no one remaining, sir. I've just walked the length of the train, clearing up litter and checking stuff folk have left behind. I think I would have noticed a girl." "Yes, sorry, I just thought..." The guard wasn't unsympathetic. "She could have caught the later train, sir. There's another two due in from London tonight. She would have phoned me to let me know. She's very good that way." "These phones aren't always all they're cracked up to be. Maybe her battery's gone." "I suppose that's possible. Listen, thanks. I'll just wait for the next one. Do you know when it's due in?" "One gets in at 21:38, the other at 23:54. He looked at Bill again and felt sorry for him. He had a couple of daughters himself, and he knew what it was like to worry about them. "Come with me. I'll ask my manager if you can sit in our office until then." He guided Bill to a doorway at the side of the concourse and climbed the stairs inside, motioning for Bill to follow. After talking briefly to a smartly dressed older woman, he directed Bill to sit in one of the chairs in what looked like a staff room, with a low table in the centre and a hot beverage vending machine in the corner. The woman, who introduced herself as Sheila, but whose badge told him she was Mrs. S. Craney, Operations Manager, Virgin Trains, looked after him once the guard had signed off and headed homewards, with a last good luck aimed at Bill on his way out. She fetched them both a cup of tea and sat down opposite. "How old is your daughter, Bill?" "She's 25, Bill thought it must have sounded premature to be so worried about an adult who had effectively missed the train. "What does she do for a living?" "She's a trainee journalist with the Times. She has a degree in journalism. Bill couldn't keep the pride out of his voice. "That's fantastic. One of my boys wanted to be a sports writer, but he didn't get the grades. Kids say." Bill wasn't really in the mood for polite conversation, but it wasn't in his nature to be impolite. "What does he do now?" "He works in a bank. It's a good job, but it's not what he wanted. The money's good though." Carol was always good at school and through university. She finished as one of the top students in her year. That's why she got the job in the Times. "You and your wife must be very proud of her. Do you have any other children?" Bill's face clouded over. "My wife died earlier this year. We have no children other than Carol. It's been a bad year for us." The rail manageress apologised. "I'm sorry, I didn't realise." No, you weren't to know. It's probably why I'm so worried about Carol." He looked at the woman sitting across from him. Concern was written all over her face, but he could see that she didn't know what to say. "She died of breast cancer in August," Bill said. "She was diagnosed in April, and despite treatment, she didn't even get a small respite from it. They did a mastectomy and gave her chemotherapy, but it was too far gone. I think she hid it for a while. Maybe if she'd gone to the doctor earlier." His voice trailed off. "That's awful. It's a horrible thing, cancer. It must have been hard on your daughter too." "It hit Carol hard, but she was great. She came up from London every weekend from when her mother told her about the cancer, taking her to clinics, visiting her in hospital during her treatment, and in the hospice towards the end. She sounds a marvellous daughter. She must be a great comfort to you." "She is. She stayed with me for a week after the funeral, sorting all Alison's things out and helping with the paperwork and all the formalities normally associated with death." Sheila Craney could see that Bill was happy to talk, and she was a good listener. It was part of her role to deal patiently with her customers' problems, and although it wouldn't have appeared in her job description, she considered it her duty to do what she could to look after Bill's well-being. There may have been a degree of him offloading some of his cares onto a stranger, because Bill, who normally kept himself to himself, felt comfortable talking to the friendly and sympathetic woman who had time to spare for him. After descending to the platform with Bill to meet the next train, still with no sign of Carol, she sent him back upstairs while she sorted out a few minor issues resulting from the latest arrival, and then followed him back to sit with him until the train arrived. Bill told her how he had made a special effort with the Christmas tree because he knew that's what his wife Alison would have wanted. But he'd booked a nice local restaurant for Christmas dinner, figuring that the two of them sitting at the family table without Alison might be a little too morbid. Sensing that Bill had unburdened himself enough, she told him a little about her own family, and it seemed to help pass the time for Bill, listening to the stories of the exploits of her three boys. He even managed an odd smile, reflecting that they'd had a much easier time bringing up Carol than Mrs. Craney had dragging up her tribe. When it was time to meet the last train, she went down the platform with him and waited until it had emptied. Her heart went out to him when it became obvious that his daughter wasn't on it. Her shift finished, she reluctantly advised him to go home and try and contact Carol first thing in the morning.
Thank you so much, Alan. I'm going to stay with you because we have a question from Keith Young, who says, love the story. Before you start a book, do you have all the story planned out, or does it evolve as you go?
Oh, I'm a planner. I'm a planner. It changes, but I've got to have the core of the story, yeah.
So how do you plan?
It's really sad. I use a spreadsheet.
Okay, yeah, cool.
So it's not, yeah. I'm almost embarrassed to say that.
No, don't be. I know loads of writers who use spreadsheets and flowcharts.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's the only way for me.
Thank you so much for that. Right, straight on to the next one. See, already getting lots of love for the spreadsheets in the chat, Alan. Don't be embarrassed. Okay, who's next? Next we have Lucy Atkins. Lucy Atkins is a journalist, award-winning author, and Sunday Times book critic. She has written for publications including The Guardian, The Times, The Telegraph, The TLS, and many UK magazines. Ooh. She judged the Costa Prize in 2017. Ooh. And teaches creative writing at Oxford University. Are you sure you're with the right crowd here, Lucy? I feel a bit embarrassed. Lucy's novel, The Night Visitor, has been optioned for TV. Woo! And her latest novel, Magpie Lane, has just been published by Quercus. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Lucy Atkins.
Unmute myself, that would help. You've also got a bonus cat. So I'm going to read to you from Magpie Lane, and it's early in the book, and it's where my main character meets, who's a nanny, meets the little girl that she's going to be looking after for the first time. And she's the nanny to the president of an Oxford college. I know the cat's getting a lot of love, probably more than the book, but we'll press on. The main problem with my line of work is that children come with parents, and parents come with opinions, thoughts, urges, and impulses, most of them entirely misguided. This is why I've stuck to short-term positions for visiting professors, jobs with a built-in endpoint, and ideally a solid language barrier. I have no desire to become part of anybody's family. That would feel delusional and a bit humiliating. In fact, I turned down the University of Utrecht couple purely because they couldn't stop talking about how their last nanny had been a beloved family member. The children, of course, are a different matter. For however long I'm in their lives, I do my very best to make things better for them. As Mariah and I sat in the garden room that first day, the door flew open and the screech of drills filled the air, making us both jump. Nick stepped in. It took me a second to notice that there was a child behind him. Her thin arms were wrapped around herself, and her eyes were fixed on the floor, so that all you could see was a dark nebula of curls. I took a sharp breath. The curls seemed familiar somehow precious, and for a moment I couldn't take my eyes off them. Nick wore a white shirt, black jeans, and tortoiseshell glasses. His damp hair was combed back and his forehead bulged as if his capacious brain was exerting a dangerous pressure on his skull. "Ah, Dee," he said, "you made it." Both Nick and the child were wearing white tops and dark bottoms. However, while his jeans were immaculate and pressed, her leggings were baggy at the knee and tatty. Her feet, in pink flip-flops, clearly unsuited to a building site, were bony and pale, and I saw lines of dirt under the toenails which needed trimming. "Ah, there you are, shut the door!" Mariah leapt up. Felicity's body gave a shudder as the door slammed. She shifted her head, and a giant green eye blinked up at me momentarily from a heart-shaped face. Then she ducked her head again and began to scratch behind one ear viciously. A wave of emotion that I could neither identify nor explain moved silently through me. I wanted, very badly, to reach out and still her scratching fingers, to touch her crazy puff of hair. I knew then that I should leave. This family was all wrong, too troublesome, too tense, too complicated, but I could not bring myself to go. I needed to see Felicity's face again. I needed to know that this child was all right. "So, Bun, this is Dee." Nick scooped one arm around her shoulders, easing her forwards. "My daughter can be rather quiet. She's a bit shy, but It's okay," Mariah cut him off. "I've done all that." They exchanged a glance. "Ah, well," I said, "I can be a bit quiet myself." Felicity's ear flooded with colour. I felt that she didn't want me to look at her, and she certainly didn't want me to speak to her. She didn't want to be spoken about at all, in fact. So I asked Mariah and Nick when the lodging's renovations were expected to be finished. "Well, they'll be done downstairs more or less by the end of the week, and the attic rooms are nearly there," Mariah said. "Being master, Nick can get a huge workforce. It's amazing, actually. So," she grinned intensely, "we'll basically have you as soon as you can move in." Nick's eyes flickered from Mariah to me and then back to Mariah again. "What? We're all settled already, really?" "I think so, darling. Dee's got tons of experience. She's been a nanny for years in Oxford to all sorts of children." Nick turned to me and said in a patrician tone, "My wife's a force of nature, Dee. Please don't let her bulldoze you." "I'm not easily bulldozed," I said, "but I do wonder what Felicity thinks of this." "We haven't discussed terms and conditions yet," Mariah said loudly to Nick. "Right, but you can get Sally to sort all that out though, can't you, darling?" Nick's face softened as he nodded at his wife and then leaned over Felicity. "So, Bun, Dee might help us out. How about that? She's very nice. She's looked after lots of children before." She didn't react and he straightened again. "Of course, we'll need references from your former employers before we settle anything." "Oh, Nick, don't be so bossy. She's happy to give references, aren't you, Dee?" Mariah reached out and ran a hand through his hair, disrupting the combed lines. She turned to me again, and Nick put his free arm around her and they leaned against each other. A little family tableau. Mother, father, daughter. If they'd stayed that way, I think I would have left. But Felicity wriggled out and vanished behind Nick. She peeked at me around his hip, shoving her hair back with both hands. There were shadows under her wide-apart eyes, which were the deep green of a ficus or a fern exposed to a sudden shaft of sunlight. Her face was bone white. She vanished again behind her father. I knew I should have made my excuses and left, but it was as if tiny hooks had sprouted from my heart and attached themselves to this small, vulnerable being. I wanted to know her. I wanted it more than I'd wanted anything for a very long time. "I don't think we have met the college couple you worked for last," said Mariah. "Did they leave already?" It really was an extraordinary way to introduce an anxious child to her new carer. Felicity had barely managed to look at me, let alone adjust to the idea that I was to be her new nanny, and she certainly had not agreed to that or anything else. But Nick and Mariah were nodding and smiling, and I saw that beneath all this confidence and rapid decision-making, they were as anxious and unsettled as their child. They were desperate to be rescued, I felt, though from what, I had no idea. I decided that I must, for Felicity's sake, stay and find out.
Thank you so much, Lucy. We've had a question from Alex Hawley. Alex says, "Hi Lucy, I know you're a lecturer at Oxford, which you've written about before. What does it offer as a location for crime novels that is different to other places that you've written about?"
Well, the thing that really interests me is the same thing that interests you know, all that bit that's all behind all the Morse books. It's that feeling that you have these colleges and they're little claustrophobic, tense, highly charged kind of micro worlds, and they're sort of self-governing. They're full of extremely clever but sometimes quite complicated and dangerous people, and you know, it's just a writer's dream, really.
Excellent, thank you for that. And we've got another question from Viv Rich that says, do your characters drive your plots, or do you start with an idea and the characters then grow from that?
Yeah, I'm the opposite to Alan. I'm not a planner. They're really driven by the characters, and it's all, when I was writing Magpie Lane, it took me about 5 months of just writing and rewriting the first 3-4 chapters, because I couldn't get her voice. And then the minute I got her voice, then she sort of took off and started to, I mean, it sounds really pretentious, but there is that feeling that the characters start to do or say or get interested in things, and then you follow them down that particular alleyway.
Great, thank you so much for that. So a round of applause to Lucy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Back to planning and not planning. Big divide on the chat. I've just got to say that. Some people are all over the spreadsheets. Funnily enough, the troublemakers don't like a spreadsheet. Broadfoot. Anyway, moving on. Our last speaker of this section of the evening is one of our speakers from last year, Derek Farrell, another troublemaker. Derek Farrell is the author of 5 Danny Bird mysteries: Death of a Diva, Death of a Nobody, Death of a Devil, Death of an Angel, and the novella Death of a Sinner. They're all published by Fahrenheit Press. The books are contemporary crime novels centering around a grimy pub in South London, its staff and regulars, and focusing on the investigative endeavours of the pub's nominal landlord and his aristocratic best friend. They've been described by Neil Broadfoot as having heart, humour, and enough twists to give you whiplash. By Chris McCrudden as, sorry, I mispronounced that completely, Chris McCrudden as like MC Beaton on MDMA, that is just a fantastic description. And by no less an expert than Monty Python's Eric Idle as quite fun. Derek is married and lives with his husband in West Sussex. They have no cats, dogs, goats, or children, though they do have every Kylie Minogue record ever recorded, twice. So everybody, Derek Farrell.
Hello, thanks for that, Vic. I'm going to read tonight from Death of a Sinner, which is my latest novella, which is published by Fahrenheit 69 in an edition that is a Tet Besh. So you got that one on one side, and then on the other you've got Everything Happens by Joe Perry. Sinner's Palace is a reality TV show from the makers of The Real House Husbands of Colchester, Dairy Farm Lock-In, and Suicide Vest Karaoke. The undisputed star of Sinners is Cartier Cobb, a glorious tabloid monster with a vicious tongue and a merciless bullying streak. While the cast are assembled for filming in the Marquis of Queensberry public house, it emerges that there may be a murderer in their midst, and naturally Cartier Cobb is convinced she is the target. So begins another adventure for Danny Bird and the unflappable Lady Kaz, as this time they strive to unmask a killer while navigating the sordid, petty, and duplicitous world of reality TV. And before I go on, I should warn everybody that this reading contains, almost from the beginning, profanity and falafel, so you've been warned. Chapter 1. There have been some fucking awful allegations going around, and if I find out who the alligators are, there's going to be murders. Did she just say alligators? Kaz, her Tom Collins halfway to her mouth, raised an eyebrow at me. I glanced at the blimp-like blonde in the middle of the room, everything from her shellacked beehive past her obviously surgically enhanced frontage and on down to her Louboutin trainers, seeming to radiate outrage, and shrugged. I would not, I said flatly, be remotely surprised. Then I went back to polishing the glass in my hand. Polish that anymore and you'll get RSI, Kaz observed dryly, swiveling on her bar stool so she could get a better look at the furious blonde. First off, the outraged woman announced to the small circle around her, the factory making my magnolia and peppermint body spray has not been closed down because the elf people found anthrax in the machinery. Second, I have not been offered a permanent slot on Wicked Women. After what happened yesterday, I doubt I'll ever be asked back there again. And lastly, and if I find out what motherfucker started this one, I will gut them like a fucking trout. I did not send Cheryl Cole a shit in a jiffy bag. The Rotters have the offending article and I've offered to undergo a DNA test to prove that the poo in question is not mine. That means she got someone else to shit in a jiffy bag for her, I muttered under my breath, receiving from Kaz a dismissive wave that said, we know, shut up. Oh, and while I'm at it, Cartier Cobb announced to the assembled, I have not made a sex tape. This week, I said, realizing as the blonde shot me a look of pure filth that I'd said it a bit louder than I'd intended. All these lies have been in the paper since Sunday, and if I find out which review fuckers are selling these stories about me, there will, like I said, be murders. Are we clear? The room filled with a general mumble of acknowledgement, and Cartier glared around the room. Where's my fucking falafel? She demanded. I'm not sure how much more of this I can take, Ali Carter, the bar manager of the pub we were in, sidled up to me and fixed me with the sort of doleful, tragic look that Eeyore might use if he was off his meds and discovered that everyone in the 100-acre woods was, after all, a complete and utter bastard. You don't think you can take it? I laughed mirthlessly and put the glass on the shelf with a little too much force before reaching into the dishwasher and removing another. Well, she's funny on the telly, Ali said, watching as a small, mousy woman, her jeans and indigo shirt testament to the fact that double denim was clearly still a thing in some places, ran from the kitchen behind us, a polystyrene box in her outstretched hand, and charged over to the glowering blonde. Sorry, the denim woman said quietly. It was a bit fiddly getting them all identical sizes. The blonde snatched the box, flipped open the lid and surveyed the contents. At length, a falafel was chosen and nibbled. She pulled the sort of face I'm assuming Plato pulled when he downed his final cocktail, spat the mouthful of falafel back into the box and beckoned the woman closer. Are you trying to poison me? She asked, holding the box at arm's length under the nose of the other. Poison you? Double denim lady paused just out of reach, blushed, stammered. I don't understand. Don't you like them? Taste one. The smaller woman shook her head slightly. I can't, Cartier. I'm on medication for my blood pressure. It's really good stuff, but one of the side effects is I can't really taste anything. Come here. Cartier moved her head as though calling the other woman closer, and when the woman had come within arm's reach, moved a hand out to grasp her by the chin, lifting her head so she was able to lock eyes with her. When I ask for falafel, I want some crunchy chickpea fritters, bit of pitta, maybe some salt in the yogurt sauce. Not too much garlic, and are you listening, Di? Not 2 fucking fistfuls of salt in the bloody things. Christ, I'm not surprised you've got blood pressure if you eat shit like this. Now, she dropped her hand, smirked at the other woman, and held the offending meal at arm's length. Take these back and go make 12 more that don't have a shit ton of salt on them. And so saying, she dropped the box of falafel on the floor, upside down, so that the contents went all over the place. Little bitch, Ali snarled, rolling up her sleeves as though she were about to go for her. I held a hand out to delay her. They paid a deposit, which we'll now use to have the whole carpet cleaned. And can I just remind you, I didn't want this lot here. So let's get this out of the way right up front. None of this was my fault. None of it. Simmer's Palace wasn't a show I watched. Oh, I'm not one of those sniffy types who bangs on about how reality TV is nothing more than a bunch of no-marks being told what to shriek at each other as they run around the set in their pants. No, that's not me. But here's the thing. The premise of Simmer's Palace, a bunch of fit, sexy young things are forced to live together in a luxury apartment in London and couple up for our entertainment, sounds less like a TV show premise and more like a living hell. If I want to watch straight 20-somethings drunkenly snogging each other, I'll head on down to my nearest Wetherspoons, where at least I can get a pie and a pint at the same time. And what turned me off the show the few times I had watched it was how competitive it was. Nobody was allowed to just meet someone and like them. There had to be a jealous ex to verbally assault first, or a screaming fit with a putative new boy-girlfriend to navigate before they could be allowed to settle down into spooning, snogging, and domestic bliss broken only occasionally for a spot of infidelity and or a round of lovers' tiff. The lovers' tiffs usually, from the half hour or so I'd seen, bordered on physical assault and ended invariably in sex, which, as it was filmed using a night vision camera set up in the appropriate bedroom, resembled nothing so much as a documentary on the mating habits of the urban badger. The queen bee of the Sinner's Palace mob was one Cartier Cobb. Her bulky blondness all lined back her shoulders in tangerine blusher, making her resemble some sort of carb-obsessed Nordic goddess, an overweight Freya in a velour onesie. And that image tended to remain until a millisecond after Ms. Cobb spoke, at which she was less Freya, more fishwife. Her foul-mouthed tirades and bullying temperament had gained her a veritable who's who of columnists, happy to describe her in terms that made it sound like the collapse of Western society, the end of the gold standard, the evaporation of faith in God, and possibly rickets too, were all down to this mouthy Essex girl, who was, right now, smirking down on the double denim woman as she desperately tried to scoop the falafel and hummus back into the polystyrene box with her bare hands. Cartier, like one of those creatures that eats its own siblings in the nest, was the sole remaining member of the first season's cast of Sinner's Palace. The producers of that show had twigged by about week 3 of the first season that they had a glorious monster on their hands, and that all anyone, journalists, people on Twitter, people at water coolers who hadn't even seen the show, were talking about was Cartier Cobb and her non-stop gob. And they'd consequently tweaked the remaining episodes, upping the amount of Cartier in the mix, bringing various secondary characters into her orbit in order to give her things to do, people to screw, and violent arguments to enact on screen. And the rest of the original cast had been axed and replaced with newer, hotter, more sinful characters, which made it all sound a bit like Game of Thrones in an IKEA duplex, which, as I was soon to discover, is almost exactly what it was. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so a couple of weeks ago at Virtual Noir at the bar, Danny Marshall read for us, and we tried to get hashtag Fuck You Maltesers trending thanks to his reading. Danny has now asked if we can get Where's My Fucking Falafel trending, and he'd also like to know where he sends the bill for spilled rum across his laptop. He says that was bloody brilliant, Derek, honestly creased. So my question is, can we expect profanity and falafel that will they, won't they, hot ace crime fighting duo to make an appearance in an upcoming novel?
We're working, well, profanity and falafel are going to be two cats when I do my cat detective novel. So I'm working on that one.
Excellent. And before we go for a break, are you a plotter or a pantster?
Well, I am a real plotter, but this is the first one I ever wrote, thanks to Mr. N. Broadfoot, that I was encouraged to not plot. And it worked. It worked. I don't think there's anything better or worse on them. I think they're just different ways.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. That was excellent. Thank you very much. And we're loving the fact that you're in a bar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have a 5-minute break now. So if you want to talk about us on social media, it's hashtag VNATB. If you'd like to enter the prize draw and haven't yet, email this email address with the subject enter, and we will see you back here in about 5 minutes. Thank you very much. caught me unawares, didn't it? Thank you so much to our first 3 readers, Lucy Atkins, Derek Farrell and Alan Jones. Thank you very much. Right, on with the show. Hopefully you're all having a lovely time with your tonics and water and tonic, Zoe Shaw. That's an odd combination. Interesting. Just as well, because you're next up. That was total fluke. Okay. Zoe Sharp joined us for last year's Newcastle Noir Fringe, Noir at the Bar as well, so it's just lovely to have you back, Zoe. Zoe began her crime thriller series featuring former Special Forces trainee turned bodyguard Charlie Fox after receiving death threats in the course of her work as a photojournalist. She opted out of mainstream education at the age of 12 and wrote her first novel at 15. As well as the Charlie Fox books and the Lakes crime thriller series featuring CSI Grace McCall and Detective Nick Weston, Zoe writes standalones, short stories and collaborations with espionage thriller author John Lawton. Her work has won or been nominated for awards on both sides of the Atlantic, being used in school textbooks, inspired an original song and music video, and been optioned for TV and film. Woo! When not in lockdown in the wilds of Derbyshire, Zoe can be found improvising self-defense weapons out of ordinary household objects, international pet sitting, or crewing yachts in the Mediterranean. It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. Zoe is always happy to hear from readers, reader groups, libraries and bookstores. And it is Zoe's birthday later on this week. So please, everybody, welcome Zoe Sharp, but also wish her a very, very happy birthday. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Vic. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you. I'm going to read you a little bit from the new book that will be out in the Lakes Thriller series on the 26th of May. And this is the start of the actual book that's called Bones in the River. And the tagline for this is that if something happens and there are no witnesses and you have everything to lose, what do you do? So, part 1, Tuesday night. His eyes drifted from the road only for a second. That was all it took. One moment he was driving up the winding valley, the stark blaze of his headlights making the dewed grass seem frosted in the darkness. No street lamps out here, no white lines, no taxis either. Or maybe he would have called one. Not that he was over the limit by any means, but over the course of a leisurely evening's dinner with friends, perhaps he'd had one more than he ought, one more than was sensible for a man in his position. Enough to cushion his reactions so that when he caught the flash of movement at the side of the road, he was just a fraction slower than he might have been. He jerked the wheel, the shock of it a jolt to the chest, and then came another jolt, as the near side tyres rose up and over as something thudded against the underside of the car. Later, he would be ashamed that his first instant thought was annoyance at the damage to his vehicle. He stamped on the brakes and staggered from the driver's seat. His breath came harsh in the still night air. Using the flashlight on his phone, he edged back along the tarmac strip. During the day, the dark surface absorbed heat. Come nightfall, he knew that sheep liked to lie on it. As he scanned the verges, he tried to persuade himself that what he'd hit was merely a sheep, or perhaps a badger. Right up until he saw it, lying crushed on the deserted road, a child's bicycle. Chapter 2. High over Malastang, out of the peat bogs on Blackfell Moss, the River Eden rises. Once she was in Westmoreland, now she has one foot in the Yorkshire Dales, another in Cumbria, holding the front line and shaping the border. Born as Red Gill Beck, she toboggans the steep valley side, rips and stumbles, blossoms into Hellgill Beck. With a bellow, she launches over Hellgill Force to tumble into Aysgill Beck. Their twin spirits trip and twine, combine to become the Eden. And as the Eden she broadens, settles, slinking alongside the cut of road and railway as if hoping for cover, she roams restless across the valley floor, stealing from the fields at every turn, snatching at trees that dare to dangle their fingers beneath the surface of her skin. She soothes stones smooth, juggles boulders just for giggles. At Watayat, she skirts the gypsy encampment widely, as if not liking to intrude. They have brought their buckets and kettles down to her, but she has plenty to share. Early summer rains have left her fat and full-blooded. Without judgment, she accepts the offered body, wraps him tight and holds on. No Sharon's hand upon the tiller to guide him, no coin under his tongue. No matter. Nightwater black, she bears him downward, onward towards Kirby Stephen. She is unaware of her might, delighted as she is by the company, and careless in that delight. Like a kitten toying with a butterfly, she has no understanding of delicacy, the fragility of flesh and bone. At Stencrith Falls, she whirls him through the gorge in a froth of excitement, a wild ride, snapping bites from the rock over which she roils. Though his slack limbs flail to her rhythm, he fails to laugh. She gathers him closer, binding him, shrouding him, over and colder, under a shot-down moon, reflected back from the rippled surface of his grave. And back to Vic. I thought I'd do something nice and cheery, you know, to make up for the solemnity of Derek's piece.
Absolutely, you know, that's what Noir is all about. We can be laughing 1 minute and then not. So thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you very much for that, and have a lovely birthday. Okay, so we have Karen Murdarasi next. So Karen Murdarasi is from Glasgow, but lost her Glaswegian accent in Yorkshire and never found it again. She studied ancient history at the University of St Andrews, the best university in the world apparently, went to Bible college and then worked in Albania as a missionary for a few years. Now back in Scotland, she works as an Albanian interpreter as well as writing professionally. Karen has had a couple of novelised biographies published by Christian Focus Publications, plus about 20 short stories in various magazines and anthologies. Ooh! Her first novel, Leda, was shortlisted for the Scripture Union New Fiction Prize in 2007, and she's currently working on a series of contemporary thrillers set in St Andrews, based on an ancient Roman legend. Tonight, Karen will be reading an extract from the first of these, the Sarcophagus Scroll, which is out on submission. So everybody, Karen Murdarasi.
Okay, hopefully I'm unmuted, yeah? Okay, good. So I'll give you a little bit of context where we are in the Sarcophagus Scroll. So it's about a PhD student called Ellie, and she's studying at St Andrews when she discovers this scroll, which seems to be by the Roman king Numa, and it's not supposed to exist. So this is very exciting for her academically. But what's more unfortunate is it seems that there is a string of deaths connected to the scroll because someone is trying to prevent them from being discovered, the scroll from being discovered. And we join the story where Ellie has just found out that her tutor, Jason Tantalon, has set up a meeting with the man she suspects of being the serial killer who's protecting the scroll. So she has to find Jason before something horrible happens. So we meet her as she's on her way to his local, the Central, hoping that he'll be there. The cloud choke light was already starting to fade. The windows of the Central shone like warm beacons in the gathering gloom. Ellie pushed open the door firmly, hoping that Tantalon would be here, that she could tell everyone to stand down, and soon they would all be laughing about their fears. But Tantalon was not there. Ellie scanned the room, and her eyes met those of a plump man in his mid-30s, with tousled dark hair just starting to show the grey. He smiled at her, the smile becoming broader as she held his gaze. He looked familiar. She had a sudden vision of Tantalon scowling at her from below as she danced on a table, the dark-haired man beside him with a mocking smile. Ellie marched across the room. "Hi, are you Dr. Tantalon's friend?" she said immediately, coming to a halt on the opposite side of his table. I am, he said, and you must be his lovely postgraduate. Yes, said Ellie, momentarily flustered. I'm Ellie, Dev, interrupted the man, moving his pint to his left hand and wiping his right on his jumper before offering it to her to shake. It was still damp and cold from the pint. He released Ellie's hand and indicated the stool in front of him. What can I do for you? I can't stay, Ellie said, perching on the very edge of the stool. I'm looking for Dr. Tantalin. Do you know where he is? Sorry. No need to apologise. I expect Jason will be here quite soon. I wouldn't want to be too many pints in advance before he got here. He gave her a warm smile, full of self-deprecating humour that made his eyes twinkle. Ellie wondered absently if that often worked on women. She imagined it might, but her mind was in another zone altogether. Did he say a time, or have you heard from him? He left Swallowgate ages ago. I just missed him. That was at 4 o'clock. Dev knitted his eyebrows a little, but kept half a smile. This must be important if you've been looking for him for the best part of an hour. Actually, Jason did mention that he had a meeting this afternoon, but I don't think he expected it to last too long. He is planning to appear at some stage. He smiled warmly again, but his bonhomie was not rubbing off on Ellie, who seemed tense enough to spring up from the stool like a jack-in-the-box. Did he say where? This is really important. It can't wait. I need to be at that meeting too. Dev chuckled gently. I'm not surprised you don't want to be cut out. Don't let your tutor steal all the glory. Ellie's face expressed a mixture of confusion and anxiety, so he explained. Yes, he told me about your very exciting find, but don't worry, my lips are sealed. Jason told me in confidence that he was going to the special collection. Ellie sprang up from her stool. Thanks. Dev rose too. Look, can I take your number in case you miss him? It's all the way out on the North Hall. I'll call you if he arrives after you leave to save you a wasted trip. Thanks, Ellie said, already crab-walking towards the door as she spoke, but I've got to go. Bye. She thrust her way through the old wooden door and into the frigid air, breaking into a cautious run on the slippery pavement. Dev looked at the door swinging closed and raised his pint again. I always said professional ethics were overrated, he murmured. Ellie rushed west along Market Street as quickly as she dared, heading further inland towards the special collection. The pavements were gritted, but the gutters were full of piled grey snow, and puddles of meltwater were starting to refreeze as the sun went down and the temperature went with it. Some shops were shutting, but St Andrew's Central Street was still busy with students and the odd local. Ellie kept dodging round knots of people onto the cobbles of the road and cursed when her foot finally slipped on the rounded surface and she went down on her knee. Are you all right? Asked a guy in a warm-looking black coat, helping her up. Fine, Ellie replied. Ow, mostly fine, thanks. Her knee stinging from the knock and the icy damp patch where she'd fallen, Ellie continued down Market Street more slowly. St Andrews was tiny, that wasn't in dispute, but with time against Ellie, its few streets seemed so long. She passed the main shopping area and beyond it the Union. Pedestrians were sparser at the western end of the street, and she was able to speed up a little. Cutting across the roundabout that marked the end of Market Street, she remembered the others were searching too. She crossed the roundabout and kept heading straight on towards the west, pulling out her phone with numb hands as she went, and wishing she had worn gloves. Martin's went to voicemail, so she left a message. Carla picked up. Hey, someone remembered that phones exist. Found him? No, but I met his friend and he said Jason was meeting the librarian at the special collection on the North Hall. Jason? Dr. Tantalin. I can use his first name, you know. I'm not 12. I'm saying nothing? Anyway, I'm on my way there now. I'll let you know if I find him. Okay, what should I do? Carla asked. Maybe find Martin? Find out if Neil's seen anything useful? I'm already halfway there, but I'll call if I need you to come out here too. Okay, I'll keep the line clear. Especially for you. Bye, Carla, Ellie said, cutting off her sister's singing. She was now nearly at Kinnisburn Park, and her knee was starting to throb in good earnest. She gritted her teeth and hobbled into the park, then cut through a doorway in the wall on the other side of the park that led directly to the top of the hall. The snow-smothered ground swept away down to the main northern road into town, far below. There was a steady flow of traffic down there, under the glow of the street lamps, but the hall itself was deserted. Ellie made her way along next to the stone wall, being careful on the untreated path. Once her path joined the wider one leading down from the road beyond the park, Patches of grit broke up the snow, and she could make better progress. There was no noise except the cry of seagulls and the faint hum of the traffic on the road. She could see a single car parked in front of the special collection, but as she got close, it started to move. Ellie picked up her pace, but she was still too far away to see the car's registration number. It pulled out and drove down the hill towards the main road. The lights illuminating the science building swept along the green chassis of the car. Then it disappeared behind them and was gone. Ellie's heart was beating faster than her exertion warranted. What had that car been doing at the special collection after hours? Had the driver seen her approaching? There could have been a perfectly innocent explanation, but Ellie's mind was not inclined towards innocent explanations at the moment. Her breath puffed around her like mist as she jogged through the gravel car park and around the corner to the prefab building's entrance. It was locked. She tried it again, putting her left hand against the door as she jiggled the handle with her right. Her left hand came away wet. She held her hand up to the weak yellow artificial light. The stuff smeared on it looked black, but Ellie had a strong feeling that was not its true colour. Holding her left hand away from her as if it could burn her, she fumbled her phone out with the other and turned on its light. In the cold, white light of the mobile phone, the blood on her hand was deep red, the colour of Tantalin's jumper. She made an involuntary noise of horror and disgust and dropped the phone. Crouching down, she scrubbed her left hand painfully on the frozen snow, fighting the urge to throw up. Her phone's light, which it was now throwing uselessly across the ground, faltered and went out. "No!" Ellie groaned. She picked it up and jabbed a button to make the screen turn on. The watery blur of pixels told her all she needed to know, but still she tried to make a call. The screen would not respond to her fingers, the icons randomly sliding about, as if she dropped it in vodka rather than wet snow. She swore at it, but it was the least of her troubles now. Pushing it roughly into her back pocket, she looked once again at the smudge on the door and noticed what she had not seen before: dark drops on the path that led back to the car park. She was not particularly surprised to see that they stopped approximately where the green car had been parked. Thanks, back to Vic.
Thank you so much for that. Really enjoyed it. I felt like I was there in St Andrews, so thank you so much, Karen. That was brilliant. Okay, just a quick reminder, folks, in case you've forgotten, you've got the Q&A button down at the bottom. So if you do have any questions for anybody reading tonight, even if it's somebody who's already read, if you just let us know who you want to ask the question of, please feel free, and I'll certainly try and do my best for you. Okie dokie. Also, in case you haven't already, you can still email to win a free book. This one's just jumped out at me, Robert Scragg.
Hello.
So, Robert Scragg had a random mix of jobs before taking the dive into crime writing. He's been a bookseller, pizza deliverer, his words not mine, karate instructor, HR manager and football coach. He lives in Tyne Wear and is part of the Northern Crime Syndicate Crime Writers Group. For more information, visit robertscragg.com. I was going to say Rob, that's my bad. So it's www.robertscragg.com. Everybody, it's my pleasure to welcome Noir at the Bar regular, Robert Scragg.
Yes, Vic, this is where it gets confusing because I write under Robert, but no one actually ever calls me Robert apart from my mum. So I'm going to take you up on your offer, Vic, of changing what I was going to read slightly. So I was going to read a little excerpt from my latest book, All That Is Buried. What I thought I'd do instead, though, is this week I've also had a short story published in a charity anthology, which I'd like to tell you a quick bit about today, Afraid of the Light. All the author proceeds are going to Samaritans. So we've got myself and 13 other authors who've chucked a story into the mix there, with a foreword written by the lovely Alex North, aka Steve Mosby. So if you are feeling charitable, by all means go and check out the other authors who are in there as well. But I'm going to read to you a short story called Sheep's Clothing. It's like fishing, he reminds himself. He has to be patient, has to wait. Daniel stares at the screen, willing a reply to wink at him from his inbox. It's been almost 5 minutes now. Was his last message too keen, too pushy? He scrolls back up while he waits, all the way back to the top of the thread, reads it from the beginning, from his opening gambit, now weeks old. He feels the butterflies in his chest beat their wings. And this next little bit is like a chat excerpt. with a couple of usernames. Dead pretty. Cool piercings, where do you get them? Sunny skies. Thanks, I went to Pit Stop, tattoo place on Waterville Road. Dead pretty. Always wanted one, but I keep bottling it. Sunny skies. Nothing to it. Some cliches span generations. Flattery, it seems, can get you everywhere. Gets you added on their social media. Gets you access to their social circles, their rants, their endless pouting selfies, lips puffed up like Mick Jagger. Not that most of them could even pick out prehistoric performers like Jagger from a lineup these days. The hardest part is talking like he's one of them. It pains him to plumb such depths of poor grammar. Every lol is another black stain on his literary soul. He does what he has to if he's to move amongst them unnoticed, looking for the right one. The picture next to Sunny Skies looks like something out of a Next catalogue. A blonde veil of hair flopping down over her eyes and mouth, legs pointing skywards, sticking out like spokes, the arms and head making the cartwheel a five-pointed star. He imagines what the face underneath must look like. She reminds him of Bethany, constantly on the move, dancing her way through the day. What would she make of him now, of what he's become? His cheeks burn as he imagines the conversation, pictures her reaction, sees her recoil. Snakes slither in the pit of his stomach at the thought. A cheery chime pulls him back to the here and now. Daniel clicks the mouse, heart thudding so loudly he worries it'll travel up through the ceiling and wake his wife. She can never find out. She loves him, but even unconditional love has small print. He forgets to breathe as he scans the reply, lips miming the words on screen, hunching forwards. In 12 hours' time, he'll be up close and personal with Sunny Skies. Eyes close in relief and knuckles turn white with anticipation. The pressure that's been building in his head for weeks now is almost unbearable, but he knows it's only temporary. Knows that tomorrow will be a blissful release, that things will go quiet after that. He hopes they will anyway, at least for a while. He sends his short reply, a simple, cool, see you there, and starts to make a mental list of what needs to be done before noon tomorrow. He clears his browser history, switches off the laptop and pads softly into the kitchen, leaving the lights on. He pours himself a glass of water and finishes it in half a dozen long, slow mouthfuls. Pours another, but just sips at this one. No matter how many times he's thought this through, he still gets nervous. He takes it as a sign that he's still human, or at least part of him is. The part that whispers what he's doing is wrong, that he should ignore the urge to act, to seek them out. He knows that if he gets caught, they will throw away the key, no doubt about it, but he can no more stop himself than he can stop breathing. He isn't doing this because he wants to. He does it because he needs to. He has to. Daniel walks slowly, avoiding the creaky floorboards into the bathroom, the door closing behind him with a barely audible click, somehow amplified in the midnight silence. He shrugs off his clothes and steps into the shower, yanking the temperature lever all the way to the right. Hot water needles his skin, but he grits his teeth, wondering how hot it would need to be to wash away all that he's doing. By the time he gets out, he's as pink as a Brit abroad who forgot their Factor 20. He picks his feet up as he walks into the bedroom to avoid the shush of the steep carpet. His wife hasn't moved since he checked on her an hour ago, arms and legs splayed like she's hit the mattress in free fall with no parachute. He slips under the duvet and she moans as he brushes against her. She rolls against him, presenting her with her back. He wants to mould himself around her, big spoon to her little, but he hesitates. The shadow cast by what he's planning tomorrow wraps itself around his thoughts and he turns away, closing his eyes, not expecting much sleep. He wakes before his alarm. Early mornings are his favourite time of day, and he eases himself out of bed, careful not to disturb her. 6 o'clock. 6 hours is more than enough to get ready, but some parts of it need to be done before his wife wakes up, before she's there to ask questions. He heads into the garage and over to the shelves in the corner, a lifetime of accumulated things that were meant to come in handy one day, but for most that's yet to happen. Ideal for hiding what he needs in plain sight. A handful of white plastic cable ties, a roll of half-used gaffer tape, a Stanley knife speckled with spots of a dozen DIY projects. As an afterthought, he spreads the items randomly through the car. Cable ties in the glove box, knife in the boot, gaffer tape and plastic in the footwell. All fairly innocuous items in their own right, but find them all in a neat little pile together and they take on a whole different meaning. The next hour passes by him like flowing treacle. He makes conversation over tea and toast with Marie. Chooses not to comment on the homemade strawberry jam that looks more like roadkill than condiment. She doesn't so much as kiss his cheek on the way out the door as brush past it. He heads up to the study, powers up the laptop and closes his eyes as it purrs into life. He could call it off. One message is all it would take. No explanation needed. He's had this moment of indecision so many times already, but just as each time before, he takes a deep breath, logs on, tells himself everything's fine. His own profile pops up, smiling face beaming from the thumbnail picture next to his username, except that isn't his face. His gaze lingers on the young girl who stares back at him, his own murky reflection in the screen overlapping with hers, and he fancies just for a moment that his own eyes are looking back at him from her face, judging him. Dead pretty as a brunette, around 14 at a guess. Headshot coming courtesy of Google Images. A new message appears with a familiar ping. You're up early. Are we still on for later? Not chickening out? Ha, no chance. Still okay for meeting by the bridge? Yeah, gotta go, but see you there at 12. He nods to himself, knowing full well he'll be there at least an hour before. He's chosen the location carefully. There's some graffiti there, but all the tags are old, faded masterpieces. There's nothing recent that suggests they'll be interrupted. He's been there 3 occasions, different times of day, from different directions, and knows the track leading to the spot under the railway arch is as overgrown as a neglected garden. He imagines that moment of confusion on Sunny Sky's face as a strange man steps out from the shadows instead of the pretty brunette teen they're expecting. He chews his lower lip in anticipation, teeth scraping against days of stubble below it. One sharp exhale, and he's out of his chair, moving, every step taking him closer to a rendezvous he wishes he could avoid, but knows he has to make. Winter still claiming squatters' rights even now in March, and the sky is a rumple's duvet of grey cloud. Drizzle tickles his face as he picks his way carefully down the track, and wispy wet fingers of grass clutch at his legs. By the time he reaches the clearing under the arch, he's damp from the knees down. It reminds him of a crop circle, about 20 feet or so in diameter, trampled dirt littered with a carpet of crisp packets, half-crushed cans of special brew, and the corpses of half-smoked cigarettes. He crosses to the other side, slipping behind a tangle of bushes, catching a whiff of week-old piss from the wall of the arch. He checks his watch, 5 minutes past 11. There's still every chance that Sunny Skies might be here before noon, so he can't afford to switch off. There's just as much chance he'll be stood up. He slides hands into pockets, fingers brushing against the familiar shapes of the items he's brought with him from the car. All he can do now is wait and hope. Noon comes and goes. No one's showed. 10 past the hour now, but he can't bring himself to give up yet. He stares through the gaps in the bush, pinholes of light in a weave of green. It reminds him of one of those 3D puzzles where you're meant to see a shape emerge from the chaos if you stare long enough. His feet are aching from standing for so long, and he scrunches his toes in and out as he shifts his weight. 20 minutes more, then he'll call it a day. Suddenly, movement off to his right. It might just be branches bouncing in the breeze, but he flicks his eyes sideways to check. A stippling of dark spots through the branches where light used to be, a soft whisper of shoe on dirt. He slips a hand into his trouser pocket, pulling out his phone, opens the app, taps into his draft folder. He has to be sure. He hits send on the pre-typed message. Hears a soft vibration even from here, a double buzz, looks at the screen and sees that a reply is being typed, watches through the leaves as it happens in real time. A message appears on his silent screen in seconds. Sorry I'm late, here now. He edges forwards at a glacial pace, sliding the Stanley knife up one sleeve, leaning forwards to shift his weight onto the balls of his feet in case he has to act quickly. He gives it a full minute before he moves again. He's checked the path back to the clearing an hour before. There's no telltale twigs to grass him up now. He's 6 feet away. It'll be easier if Sunny Skies keeps facing away, but part of him hopes they'll come face to face at the last minute. Just the thought of making eye contact for the first time is like being plugged into the mains. It makes the hairs on his arm crackle with energy. He pictures confusion and surprise jostling for pole position as they try and make sense of why he isn't the 14-year-old girl they were expecting. Sunny Skies is facing backwards towards the road, and Daniel flows over the ground, closing the gap in 4 quick strides. His right arm snakes around a slim, cool neck, hand reaching around, clamping onto his own left bicep. Left palm plants against hair, pressing his victim's head down, neck onto the right arm. He tucks his own chin down, protecting his face. Fingers grasp at the crook of his arm, fighting to gain an inch of breath, but the chokehold is clamped tighter than a limpet against a rock. Daniel shifts his weight, pulling down and backwards at the same motion, twisting as they fall like conjoined twins to the ground. From underneath him, noises like someone making a sporadic attempt to gargle mouthwash. Daniel squeezes harder, exhales loudly, screws his eyes tight shut with the effort. He hears his own teeth grind and pulse hammer at his temples. He opens his eyes, vision studded with 1,000 fireflies. When had the twitching stopped? How long had he held on for? Too long? He has no more than 20 seconds, maybe as few as 10, before they start to come round. He rolls them onto their back. Pre-looped plastic ties slip over wrists and ankles. A strip of tape patted roughly over lips that have started to twitch awake. Eyes flutter open from behind jam-jar bottom glasses, flitting from side to side like flies looking for a place to land. Reality crashes in arms and legs bucking against the restraints, plastic cutting harsh grooves into wrists, legs draw in and out in an attempt to inch away like an injured caterpillar, but Daniel squats over his prey, sitting on a heaving chest, pinning arms up and onto the ground behind. This drives out what little breath has been snorted in, eyes bulging cartoonishly. Daniel holds a finger to his own lips, but it's like trying to calm an angry toddler. Arched hips try and throw him up and off, but he's too heavy. He waits for the fight to leave, squeezing his thighs either side of delicate ribs just to be sure. Finally, he feels the fight melt away, reaches into his sleeve, feeling the reassuring weight of the Stanley knife slip into his palm. He holds it up so it's visible, feels muscles stiffen against his own. The slender man beneath him reminds him of a schoolteacher, all spectacles and tweed. Late 30s maybe. Looks respectable enough, but the very fact he's here proves he's anything but. Daniel raises a finger to shush him again, reaches into his jacket and pulls out a dog-eared photo that he holds to show the man. He doesn't need to see it himself, doesn't trust himself not to fill up if he does. He's looked at it so many times this past year, every strand of hair, the exact angle of the smile, shadows falling across a face branded into memory. We haven't been introduced, Daniel says. His tone is flat, in the eye of the storm for now. My name's Daniel. You already know my daughter, Bethany. He waggles the photo inches from the man's face. Or should I say you knew her? The man's pupils are the size of 5-pence pieces. He's hyperventilating now, threatening to suck the tape right off his face. He shakes his head side to side, inches at first, then more vigorously. Daniel thumbs the blade out an inch, lets the photo fall to the floor, pinning the man's arms to the ground with his free hand. It lands face up. Bethany stares up at him. He hesitates. This fire inside him these last 12 months has hollowed him out. He doesn't know what will be left if he goes through with this. He knows Bethany would tell him that he's better than this, and he is, or was, before this sick bastard underneath him took away his reason to be a better man. You don't need to see this, love, he says, gently reaching down, turning the picture of Bethany over. He pats the back like he's just tucked her into bed. Feels the calmness pass. The stormy winds in his head pick up pace again. He hopes this will quieten them for good. Maybe, maybe not. But that's a chance he's willing to take. For her. For all the others that will surely follow if he doesn't. Back to you, Vic.
Thank you so much for that, Rob. Thank you. So can you just show us the anthology cover again? Afraid of the Light? Everybody, it's on Kindle at the moment for 99p and proceeds go to the Samaritans, so please do support it, and it's full of great fiction. Thank you, Rob. Okay, we're actually going to pop back to Karen because we've got a question for you, Karen. Paul would like to know, where can we obtain a copy of the sarcophagus scroll? That's Rob. That's not Karen. Karen, hello.
That's me. Hello. Yeah, unfortunately, the sarcophagus scroll is not published yet. If anyone's interested in publishing it, just get in touch. My other stuff that is published, you can find on Amazon. Just search Murdarasi. There's literally only one, or Waterstones, or wherever. But there'll be a link in the email that's sent out to all the participants later on.
Brill, thank you very much. So because you've registered for this event, you will actually get links to everybody's work and where to find them on social media as well, because they're all fabulous, and you should definitely just get all of their books, follow them all on social media. They're all very approachable, as you might have gathered. So our final reader for this third of the show is Kirsten McKenzie, all the way from New Zealand. I can't believe anybody would be that dedicated. Kirsten McKenzie fought international crime for 14 years as a customs officer before leaving to work in the family antiques store. Now a full-time author, she lives in New Zealand with her family and alternates between writing her next thriller and completing her second time travel trilogy. So everybody, all the way from New Zealand, Kirsten McKenzie.
Thank you for having me. It's 8 o'clock now, so it's not too early anymore. And I've had a coffee and I'm well lubricated, got my bar set up. So I'm going to be reading from my second thriller, which is a medical thriller, Dr. Perry. It's set in Florida in a retirement home, not the most salubrious of retirement homes. It's right down the bottom of the pecking order. And Dr. Perry is, he's not the sort of doctor you want treating you for anything, really. He likes his patients elderly, he likes his patients lonely, and he likes his patients to disappear for his own nefarious purposes. So I'm reading from about page 216, chapter 43, and one of Dr. Perry's patients isn't that elderly, but she's, Sarah Miller is lonely, she's had a terrible breakup, and he's making a house call. But Sarah also previously dated a police detective, so that's where it gets a bit interesting. Snot dripped from Sarah Miller's nose. She'd run out of tissues, so used the crusty sleeve of her sweater, a sweater stained with ketchup, pizza oil, and several days' worth of tears as she'd hibernated on the couch. The doorbell chimed, and for a fraction of a second, Sarah thought he'd come back, before the tinny voice of the doctor echoed through the intercom. The euphoric lift of her mood popped like a balloon on a thorny cactus and tore a fraction more at her damaged heart. Sarah struggled off the couch to let the doctor in. Hopefully he'd come with more medicine because she imagined the infection in her lungs trying to take hold again. Written well before COVID-19, sorry. Trying to take hold again. And then, as if the infection hurt her thoughts, her chest spasmed, triggering another coughing fit. Dr. Perry came in just in time to support her as she doubled over next to the intercom, coughing up her lungs. She should give him the entry code. Having to get up off the couch to let him in was far too tiring. Now, we can't have you hopping up and down back to the couch, Dr. Perry said, and pushed through the mountain of home delivery takeaway cartons, easing her onto the couch. Dr. Perry tried not to consider the state of Sarah's arteries as his stomach twisted at the sight of the empty soda cans in the bin and the takeaway filth littering her apartment. He held back the recriminations as he should have taken better care of her because she had no one else. He had too much on his plate at this late juncture. You had to take the good with the bad, and he hoped there was no irreparable damage. Fast food delivery companies would be the death of America if the trash littering Sarah's apartment was any sign. He assessed the woman on the couch. She wasn't a pretty sight. He appreciated her illness, but he had expected some improvement in her physical state. The furrows on her forehead looked deeper than they had last time he saw her. Her lips looked like smoker's lips. Fine lines splayed out around her mouth, not the slightest bit attractive. And her cheeks, sunken and sallow, dropping like the bear gut on Homer Simpson. Unease crawled over him. Was his formula losing its effectiveness? He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence pointed that way. Maybe a larger dose was the answer. He needed to get her out of here and to his surgery, or to the lab, somewhere where no one could hear her. Although from what he'd seen of this place, a woman screaming wouldn't bring the emergency services running. No one would interfere, not in a place like this. Somewhere abandoned by the civic authorities, ignored by town planners, owned by parasitic landlords for profit and profit only. Dosing her here would be easier. Dr. Perry cleared a space on the cluttered counter, ignoring the cockroach who scuttled out from under the trash and disappeared over the side of the kitchen cabinets. He searched the cupboards for a clean glass, choosing a Hard Rock Cafe souvenir glass at the back, and then pulled his tonic bottle from his battered leather doctor's bag. Normally his doses were based on the patient's weight and well-being, but time was running out. The walls were closing in on him. He could just leave Sarah Miller to succumb to her illness with no one any the wiser. The idea appealed, but moving to a new state with a new identity was costly, and lately his clients had been more pushy, more demanding, so the pressure was on to deliver. Adding Sarah Miller to his list might relieve the pressure, keep the walls from his door a little longer. Satisfied he'd made the right choice, he poured a liberal dose into the tacky souvenir glass, more than he'd poured for old Jimmy Poulsen from the retirement home, who, even though he'd only been skin and bones, required more than he should have. Poulsen was the first one he'd messed up for a long time, an utter waste of tonic, and disposing of him had been costly. Dr. Perry tried not to think about the mess it had made in the surgery. He'd spent hours cleaning it up, and his clients weren't happy getting involved in that side of things. His formula was failing. Dr. Perry carried the glass to Sarah, who resembled an opium addict awaiting her next hit. Eager eyes and hands outstretched, she grabbed for the glass, but Dr. Perry held on a moment longer. Now, Sarah, this dosage is stronger than what I gave you last time. You need to understand that the side effects might be uncomfortable. Do you understand? He asked, emphasizing the word might. He knew full well what the side effects were. Her pain didn't bother him, only the potential noise she might make. Sarah nodded, salivating at the sight of the milky liquid in the souvenir glass. Small sips then, Sarah, he directed. And as he loosened his grip on the glass, the doorbell rang and an unfamiliar voice shot out of the intercom. Sarah, it's me, Gary. If Sarah resembled a drug addict in the late stages of withdrawal, now she looked like a prima donna on a stage. At the sound of the man's voice, her face had lit up, breaking into a beaming smile. Her shoulders straightened and she glowed. It's Gary, she gushed. Dr. Perry snatched the glass out of Sarah's hand. He didn't care who Gary was, but whoever he was, he didn't want any questions being asked about his tonic or the treatment of his patient. An annoying interruption to his plans, to his delivery schedule. He preferred patients with no encumbrances, no family, no friends, no interferences. He fumbled as he tried pouring the tonic back into its bottle. Every drop was valuable since making more was becoming difficult. The intercom squawked into life again. Sarah, let me in, we need to speak. I'm sorry, I'm worried. Could you let him in, please, doctor? Sarah wheezed, her lungs irritated by the sudden increase of her heart rate. Dr. Perry ignored her, his mind racing ahead. It paid to prepare for all eventualities, but for the moment he struggled to find a solution. He'd have to let him in and then leave and abandon Sarah, which was a shame, but sometimes you had to cut your losses, and this was one of those times. It was probably for the best. The illness had weakened her lungs and his tonic had made no difference. She wasn't the best candidate for what his clients wanted. His line of work had been much easier in the days before technology. With so much connectivity in the world, finding patients who were truly alone was near impossible. Snapping shut his bag, he pressed the intercom button. Turning to gaze at Sarah, he shook his head. Such a waste. I'm going now, Sarah, Dr. Perry said. I'm sure your visitor can take care of you from here. Sarah pushed herself up off the couch. No, you have to stay to tell him how sick I am. He won't believe me otherwise. He always accuses me of exaggerating, of being a hypochondriac. That's one reason we broke up, and if you don't tell him how sick I have been, he'll walk out again. I know it. Please, she begged. Dr. Perry stepped over the door and, arranging the right words in his mind, he opened the door. Dr. Perry stepped back to allow Gary into Sarah's apartment. Hello, Gary, Sarah said. Sarah, are you okay? I'm fine. Well, I'm not fine. I've been very sick, Gary interrupted, and Sarah shushed him. But before you say anything, At this, Dr. Perry himself interrupted. I'm Sarah's doctor and can confirm that she's been suffering from pneumonia. She's recovering well, so you're welcome to stay and help her. This will be my last house call. She'll need a checkup, and you can do that at your local medical centre. She needs rest and good food. I'll be off. More clients to see. Sarah tried protesting, but a coughing fit took hold, and without a backwards glance, Dr. Perry slipped out the door and vanished down the emergency stairwell. not trusting that the elevator would turn up in time to remove him from the premises before Gary questioned him any further. Locking himself in his sedan, he chanced to look up at Sarah's apartment window. As he suspected, Gary was standing at the window looking down. That wasn't good, not good at all. Dr. Perry turned his car key and, fighting the urge to gun the engine, he pulled out from the curb and drove off, never once looking back.
Thank you so much. Kirsten, we have a question from Alex Hawley. Alex would like to know, who was your inspiration for Dr. Perry?
Well, my mother's just moved into a retirement village here in Auckland, but before she did that, we did the tour of all the retirement homes in Auckland, and I can tell you they're not created equal. So once you've walked into a place that stinks of urine and cabbage, and the residents are just sitting there staring blankly at television screens, it wasn't hard to create Dr. Perry. Mum is in a lovely hotel-like retirement village now, drinking every night and sitting at the back with all the naughty kids. So she's having a ball now, but that's where Dr. Perry came from, just imagining how if your place doesn't look cared for, then who are the people caring for the residents?
Well, thank you so much for that, and thank you for getting up so early to join us as well.
That's all right.
Okay, we're going to have another 5-minute break for you to top your glasses off. I'm sure Broadfoot's probably in need of another drink by now. I'm really picking on him tonight. I'm sorry, Neil. Just one quick mention. If you don't need to top your drink off during the break, Afraid of the Light, the anthology that Rob read from tonight, yesterday was second in the hot new releases category on Amazon, behind some unknown called Stephen King. So if you can all just flock there and buy at least one copy, that should, show King who the boss is.
He's a flash in the pan, Vic.
I know, I've never heard of him, Rob. I've heard of you. Exactly. So get yourself over to Amazon and download Afraid of the Light now. You've got 5 minutes, but there is also a quiz, so you better be quick. Welcome back to our final part of tonight's virtual Noir at the Bar. Dan Stubbings is on the side of Neil Broadfoot. Dan, I love you. Anyway, someone's got to stand up for him, haven't they? Anyway, right, next. Lesley Kelly. Lovely Lesley Kelly has worked in the public and voluntary sectors for the past 20 years, dabbling in poetry and stand-up comedy along the way. She has won a number of writing competitions, including the Scotsman Short Story Award in 2008. Ooh. Her first novel, A Fine House in Trinity, was published by Sandstone Press in 2016 and was longlisted for the William McIlvanney Prize. Ooh. She is now 4 books into the Health of Strangers series of crime novels set against the backdrop, come on Watson, backdrop of a pandemic. I don't know where she got that idea from. Has Lesley got a crystal ball at home? This no longer counts as speculative fiction anymore. Lesley lives in Edinburgh with her husband and 2 sons, where they are all currently fighting over the Wi-Fi. So thank you very much, Lesley, for chucking them all off the Wi-Fi tonight. Everybody, Lesley Kelly.
Hello. Yeah, I'm the author of the Health of Strangers series, which started out, as we said, as speculative fiction. I don't know how you describe it now. It's either documentary or true crime. But they're crime novels set against the background of a pandemic in Edinburgh. And my pandemic is a killer flu, but otherwise very, very similar to the situation that we find ourselves in today. The government has mandated that everybody needs to go and have a monthly health check. And the novels are set around the people that come and hunt you down if you don't turn up for your health check, the health enforcement team. And this particular health enforcement team, the North Edinburgh one, is the closest one to the Parliament. So they hunt down anybody that from a political background that hasn't turned up for their health check. So basically they do anything to do with sex, drugs, or politics. And when I was writing the book, I predicted many, many things correctly in it. From health checks to immunity checks to nurses going back in to rise in domestic violence. I did not predict the rush for toilet rolls that happened at the very beginning of this, but in fairness, I don't think anybody could have predicted that. So I'm going to read a little bit from the first book in the series, The Health of Strangers, and it's very, very appropriate because not only is it set in a pandemic, it's also set in a pub. And this features one of the main characters, Bernard, who's quite a gentle person going out with his boss, who has spent about 20 years in Lothian and Borders Police. So, over the next few hours in the pub, Bernard learned a great many things. He learned the best way to disarm a violent suspect. He learned how to gauge if a suspect was about to become violent. And he learned that Patterson had thought he was a bloody idiot when he first joined the team, but had reconsidered this and now thought that he was a bloody idiot with potential. Bernard gave a wan smile. Thanks for that. No, really. Patterson pointed at him with his pint glass. A small amount of lager splashed over the side and landed on Bernard's leg. He thought it best not to complain. I thought, what are they doing sending me this overeducated loon who keeps quoting statistics at me? Bernard tried to smile enthusiastically, but the alcohol had gone straight to his brain. The world was starting to look fuzzy. I thought, he's exactly the kind of waste of space we're getting in the police now. No good on bar brawl, but he can quote chapter and verse inequalities legislation. Just the sort that gets himself promoted and hugs a desk for the next 20 years. Patterson stopped for a mouthful of lager. But you, Bernard, you're all right. He belched, and it's your round again. Bernard stood up and realised he was very drunk. He'd had 4 pints, which is more than he'd had since, well, more than he'd ever downed in one go. Consumption of alcohol was not compatible with top-class sportsmanship. He wondered if he dared return with a soft drink. What'll it be? A pint of lager and a Coke, and a couple of bags of crisps. He looked over to see Patterson deep in conversation with the check-capped man. The two of them looked over at him, and Bernard immediately felt paranoid. What was his boss saying about him? There you go, pal, pint of tenants and a Coca-Cola for the lady. There aren't any ladies. Bernard turned round in confusion, then saw the barman smirk. Oh, very funny. He walked very slowly back to the table, but still managed to spill a fair amount of Patterson's pint. Patterson pointed in disgust to Bernard's coat, but didn't say anything. So, said his boss, leaning uncomfortably close to him, do we know each other well enough for me to ask you a very personal question? Bernard attempted to move discreetly in the opposite direction from his team leader. What would that be? When did you get the virus? Bernard lowered his drink and stared at Patterson. Is that a very personal question? Well, you know how it is. He leaned back, then took a long drink. If someone says they got it in the first wave, it's fine. But if they were in the second wave or later, there's a pretty high chance they lost somebody. I mean, even these days, there's a pretty high death rate. 1 in 40 chance of death if you catch it now. You were in the first wave then? Oh, aye, God, yeah. Me, the missus and the kids were laid up for a week with it. I was cursing at the time, but of course I had no idea how lucky we were to be immune to this new strain. And you? Second wave. Oh. Patterson contemplated his pint. Did you? The unspoken question floated between them. Bernard chose not to answer. So you were one of the lucky ones? Bernard took a long sip of his Coke while he got his emotions under control. Must have been great going through the second wave knowing you were safe. It was strange. I remember one day at the height of the panic, I turned up at the station to find out that only me and one PC, also immune, had turned up for work. Everyone else was either ill, caring for a family member, or so completely bricking it that they weren't leaving the house. Bernard spluttered. So the entire Leith police response consisted of 2 people. Patterson shrugged. It wasn't like anyone was in danger of being mugged, raped, or burgled. Any bastard approached you, all you had to do was cough. They looked at each other, then started to laugh, with great aching sobs of mirth overtaking them both. Bernard felt himself tip over into hysteria. He put his hands over his face and tried, unsuccessfully, to stop the tears from flowing. So, Bernie, said Patterson. Bernard wiped his eyes and looked blearily up at his boss. Who do you blame for today's state of affairs? Bernard ran the back of his hand across his eyes and thought for a moment. Well, in no particular order, the government for not listening to the likes of Birch and Fowler during the first wave. If they'd taken on board his warnings about the pandemic not tailing off, they might have been better prepared for the second wave. I blame the pharmaceutical companies for rushing into vaccine tests that ended up killing their test subjects, thus pandering to every conspiracy theory going that the health service was actually trying to kill people, making our job 10 times harder. And I blame the general public for being so stupid as to listen to the conspiracy theorists and, for example, not going to the doctor when they're ill because they think the pills will make them worse. And, he stopped for a crisp, I blame the chickens who started all this. Of course, let's not forget the good old fowl. Patterson poked his arm. If I'd said to you 5 years ago, Bernard, that we'd lose 1 million people to an illness and the country would still manage to keep going, would you have believed me? He started on a new point, making an impressive dent in it with just one swallow. Bernard thought for a minute. Yes, actually I would. No. His boss looked at him in disbelief. He pointed his glass at him again, but this time Bernard managed to swing his legs out of the way before the lager cascaded over the side. No, really. In the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, they estimate 3% of the world's population died. And that was hot on the heels of the First World War, and life went on. Patterson slapped Bernard's leg and was surprised to find it wet. He wiped his hand on his own leg and carried on. So, Bernie, how did they cure the Spanish flu? Ah, said Bernard, they didn't. It just ran its course. Patterson stared at his half-empty glass. Well, that's depressing. I suppose it is, but without the virus, I would never have had the joy of working for the health enforcement team. The two of them looked at each other and burst out laughing. How did you end up at the Het, Bernard? Bernard thought for a minute how best to explain the disappointing trajectory of his life so far. Well, I spent the first 15 years of my adult life playing professional badminton and studying sports science, then realised I'd got as far as I could. Trouble was, I was qualified for nothing else, so I did a master's in health promotion, and this is my first job. Another depressing thought. Anyway, drink up that Coke. It's my round, and I'm not coming back with anything other than 2 pints. Bernard started drinking, and the room began to quiver. Patterson stepped past him to the bar, and he used his time alone to look at the picture of his son that he still carried in his wallet. He felt the tears welling up again. He'd messed everything up. He hadn't saved his son, and he couldn't save his marriage. And now, when he should be at home with his wife, he'd somehow got himself trapped in the pub with his boss, too drunk to stand up. A pint of lager was plonked on the table in front of him, spilling some of its contents as it landed. Get that down, you. As Bernard picked up the glass, he wondered what would happen if he passed out here. And back to the studio.
Actually not, Lesley, because I have a question for you that I'm really surprised nobody else has asked.
Okay.
I first heard you read this either 2016 or 2017 from the debut book. All joking aside, tea leaves, crystal balls, all of that sort of stuff, where did the idea come from?
Well, in my day job, I work in the voluntary sector, and we spend a lot of time in emergency planning meetings with the local authority, with the police, with the NHS, preparing for emergency situations, things going wrong. And most of what we plan for is bad weather, because that's the kind of thing that does happen almost every year. But we also kind of plan for pandemics. So I did think, you know, we talked about the Spanish flu in 1918 there. I was kind of thinking, well, I wonder what would happen if we got something like that. And, you know, as a crime writer, I thought, well, there's bound to be new crimes that would spring up around that. And we have seen that. We've seen obviously the rise in domestic violence, but we've also seen the rise in scammers and things like that happening. So it was very much influenced by my work. And now, of course, in the middle of, we actually have a pandemic, and we're very, very busy sort of responding to that. So.
Well, thank you. And also I have a question from Joanne Burns here. Do you come up with the titles of your books? Oh, why are you laughing?
I know, Joanne.
Oh, right, okay.
Sorry, what was the question?
Do you come up with the titles of your books?
Do I come up with the titles of them? Yes, I do. Well, I'm sure all the other writers will vouch for this, that you come up with the title and then your editor says, oh, I don't think so. I really don't think so. And then can you go away and come up with 20 other titles so we can choose them? But yes, I have come up with them.
So just hold your book up so we can see it, please.
We've got The Health of Strangers, Songs by Dead Girls, Death at the Plague Museum, which is from my favourite title, and the latest one, Murder at the Music Factory.
Excellent.
And if you like the books and you're extremely quick off the mark, they're being sold on the Sandstone website for £20 for all 4.
Wow, that's a bargain. Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for you know, giving up your very precious time at the moment, considering what you're actually doing with work as well. Thank you very much, Lesley. I've actually got a question here for Zoe Sharp as well. Zoe. This is from John Park. I absolutely loved your short story, Tell Me. Have you got a book collecting all of your short stories together?
Not yet.
Oh.
Not yet, but I've got a collection of the Charlie Fox short stories, and I keep being told I should collect all the short stories together. I've done only about 20, I think, which is not that many considering how long I've been writing. But I tend to wait till somebody says, write as a short story, and then I do them. I don't tend to do them, you know, just in between other things. So.
And what kind of monster would ask you to do a short story, I wonder?
Oh, I can't possibly imagine.
Thank you for that.
You got that short story I sent you, did you?
Thank you very much, thanks. Okay, we've got 2 names. We've got Ros Watkins and Ashley Erwin left in the hat. So who are we going to go for now? It is Ros Watkins. Ros Watkins is the author of the D.I. Meg Dalton crime series, which is set in the Peak District, where Ros lives with her partner in a menagerie of demanding animals. I think if we hadn't got to such a late hour, we would have been able to see some sheep out of Lesley's window, but that time has now passed. Her first book, The Devil's Dice, was shortlisted for the CWA Debut Dagger Award, was the Times Crime Book of the Month, and has also been optioned for TV. Woo! Her second book, Dead Man's Daughter, was also a Times top pick, and the third, Cut to the Bone, is out this summer. Ros was previously a partner in a firm of patent attorneys in Derby, but this has absolutely nothing to do with there being a dead one in her first novel. In her spare time, Ros likes to walk in the hills, scouting out murder locations, but I will just check with her. Ros, you're not doing that at the moment, are you?
Not at this precise moment.
Excellent. So everybody, please give a huge round of applause to Ros Watkins.
Hi everyone. I'm so sorry about the sheep. It's just a shame that I'm on sort of towards the end, because there were sheep just out the back there and they were being really cute and sort of fighting and playing, but obviously you can't see them now. So hope everyone is doing okay. I'm planning to read a bit from my second book, Dead Man's Daughter. It's a fairly short reading, so just to give a little bit of background, the blurb on that is, could a heart transplant turn a child into a killer? And it's sort of, the book arose out of some research that I'd been reading about people who'd had heart transplants, and it seemed to change their personality, and they seemed to take on characteristics of the donor, which I thought was kind of creepy, and got my crime writery brain thinking about what if you had a heart from someone that something really awful had happened to. So it kind of went on from there, really. So I was just going to read the beginning. There's a short prologue, and then just the sort of beginning of the bit with the detective, Meg Dalton. It's all set in the Peak District, sort of near where I live, because I was very lazy about location. So this is the prologue. She lay on her back, hard metal under her, so cold it felt like being punched. The smell of antiseptic scorched her throat. She couldn't move. She tried to scream, to tell them not to do it. She was still alive, still conscious, still feeling. It shouldn't be happening, but no sound came. The man had a knife. He was approaching with a knife. Silver glinted in the cold light. Why could she still see? This was wrong. With all her will, she tried to shrink from him. He took a step closer. Another man stood by, dressed in green, calm. They were all calm. How could they be so calm? She must be crying, tears streaming down her face, even if her voice and her legs and her arms wouldn't work. Please, please, please don't. Inside her head, she was begging, please stop, I can feel, I'm still here, I'm still me. No words came out. The terror filled her, filled the room. The knife came closer. She couldn't move, it was happening. The touch of steel on her skin. Finally, a scream. One of the men placed his hand on her mouth. The other man pushed towards her heart. So that was the prologue. This is chapter 1. The woman grabbed my hand and pulled me deeper into the woods. Her voice rasped with panic. She was running towards the gorge, the place the locals call Dead Girl's Drop. That didn't sound good, particularly given the Derbyshire talent for understatement. I shouted over the wind and the cracking of frozen twigs underfoot. What exactly did you see? I know what you're thinking, she said, but I didn't imagine it. Strands of dark hair whipped her face. She must have only been in her 40s, but she looked worn, like something that had been washed too many times or left out in the rain. She tugged a similarly faded, speckled greyhound behind her. I was expecting proper police, she added. I'm a detective, D.I. Meg Dalton, remember? We wear plain clothes. No matter what I wore, I always seemed to exude shabbiness. I was clearly a disappointment to Elaine Grant. Elaine tripped on a stump and turned to look accusingly at me, her edges unclear in the flat morning light. Pale like a ghost she was. The dog saw her too. I glanced down at the dog. He panted and drooled a little. I wasn't sure I'd rely on his testimony, but I couldn't afford not to check this out. I shivered and pulled my scarf tighter around my neck. Wearing white, you mean? I said, but you saw blood. It was a nightdress, I think, just a young girl streaking through the trees like she had the devil at her heels. And yes, there was red all over her. Branches rattled above us. Something flickered in the corner of my eye, shining pale in the distance. My breath stopped in my throat and I felt a twitch of anxiety. Is there a house in these woods? I asked. I approached down a lane. Elaine walked a few steps before answering. Yes, Bellhurst House. I knew that place. The woman who lived there had kept calling the police, saying she was being watched and followed, but she'd had nothing concrete to report. After the first time, they'd joked that she had an overactive imagination, possibly a fondness for men in uniform, and we hadn't taken her seriously. Elaine touched my arm. Did you see the girl? We waited, eyes wide and ears straining. The dog let out a little affronted half bark, more of a puff of the cheeks. A twig snapped and something white slipped through the trees. That's her, Elaine shouted. Hurry, the gorge is over there. Children have fallen. I reran in my mind the control room's leisurely reaction to this call, our previous lackluster responses to the woman in the house in these woods. A band of worry tightened around my chest. I pictured a little girl crashing over the side of the gorge into the frothing stream below, covered in blood, fleeing something we'd been told about but dismissed. Maybe this was the day the much-cried wolf actually showed up. And that's that.
Thank you so much for that, Roz. Right, last one. And I believe some of you have been waiting for this one. Just to prove she was in the hat, Ashley Erwin. Ashley Erwin, for the last 2 years running, 2018 and 2019, flew into the UK to do Noir at the Bar and Newcastle Noir. She is reading to us tonight from the USA. I don't know what time it is there. She'll tell us in a minute. So Ashley Erwin writes down and dirty, lean and mean, southern pulp, with short stories peppered in Shotgun Honey, Revolution John, Switchblade magazine, Cowboy Jamboree and Cheap Pop. Her novel, A Ballad Concerning Black Betty, or the retelling of a man killer and her machete, is a Western dystopia and is available on Amazon. And she's been cranking out some soon-to-bes ever since, including a novel about some hard, her words not mine, fuckers from Eastern Kentucky, and a gonzo-fied American pastoral about a badass lawyer named Hawk. She sounds amazing when she does it. I sound ridiculous. An avid reader at Noir at the Bar and a peddler of whiskey on the side, Ashley Erwin's works can be found at her website, which is ashley-erwin, ERWIN.com, or you can always lend a holler at little BLND Ninja on Twitter to gain her thoughts. I know some of you in the audience tonight have seen Ashley read before. If you haven't, be prepared because your socks are about to be knocked off. Everybody, Ashley Erwin.
Can y'all hear me? All right. Thank you. It's a 1:43 here in Los Angeles. Glad to be here. Thank you so much. So this is just something I wrote. It's called Hitman from Hazard. A handlebar mustache crowning a shitty fucking grin, just double dog daring 6-finger Leander to make a fucking move is where we open. Hand grenade Harry, a hard killer from Hob Holler who packed a right proper parcel of guns wherever he were like to go, and who carried upon his personage the exact culprit of everything to fall apart in the after. The transition to derision born in that very same broke-down, barreled-out building on the back lot of Winona Daly's land, likewise known as a Shawnee, which were where men'd go when they got done swarping, which set up shop in the land of drinking and a womanizing. And on this fine, fair occasion, the celebratory corralling of like-minded lads, there were a recruitment at work, as sets of seedy seditions sawmilled on the floor in silence, where, unbeknownst to the current crew leader of the lot, that being Hand Grenade Harry and his vigilante redneck rat pack, who all three of them, Little Bubba, Full-Hearted Frank, and Dirty Dick Sanders, were North Star guided by the newly evolved notion that they'd actually got away with something. That 1,000-watt bulb beating dead body dents over top of missing the train station connect altogether. Fast and mean and full up on fire they were, and they made their early victories known with the following. Dirty Dick Sanders, who got his name from a lack of washing as opposed to doubling down pipe to the town's missus, Jack palanced out. Brothers, we done it. Ain't never seen no like heads nor tails to the clap of speed that gal done give it over. Cut 2. The Gold Star Standard Bank, positioned at the top of High Hazard Hill, where a measly drop of $5,000 just entered into the vault by Filthy Tom, a local ne'er-do-weller, and the thick-boned cutie pie raw-dogging gum who'd locked the box. I've told you. If I've told you once. It should be noted that amongst Dirty Dick Sanders' refusal to properly groom himself, he were also a louse, a drunk, a cheat, a thief, and an asshole with delusions that there was a woman somewhere willing to put up with his shit, though he'd yet to grace their path. And on this particular evening of rambunctious carousing, he was in fact drunker than shit. I could have had her. Boy, she were right primed for the picking. What unlikely known at the time of said dictation to the masses of fuckwads within the room were the 22 minutes prior to Filthy Tom's prompt proposal and arrival, where Full-Hearted Frank, positioned in the power seat of a gray Ford 350, delivered the dirty little rasher of news to tip-top Magoo Tom there that he was in fact getting the old frame job. And Tom, being notorious for any tattletale tendril thrown his way, decided that a dummy case to be entered into the vault instead. However, in the where's the meat moment of how big this little Sammy's gonna get, one must actually go back exactly 42 minutes to the women's restroom inside the Gold Standard Bank, where thick-boned cutie pie Maggie was in the middle of something not quite so cute. As it apparently evident she was in fact lactose intolerant despite her adamant refusal to acknowledge such injustices, this particular episode playing fiddle in the second-to-last stall. Ice cream. And though one would hope and pray most like these discouragements left to solitude, she was not alone, for just as the final flush and waft of poo-pourri left a refreshingly citrus curtain of lemony zest, a pair of steel-toed reinforced skull crushers hit the floor screen style next to her. And out popped full-headed Frank, with a head full of ideas of his own, specifically the part where he says, "Got a job for you, girl." Meanwhile, back at Winona Daly's, otherwise known as Hand Grenade Harry's mean old lady, in the back of that Shawnee, Little Bubba came for the retort, sounded like a bad honked horn. "Adder, boy, what you done had? Frank, what's an asshole look like, huh? You ever seen an asshole, Frank? Huh? You know what I'm talking about, huh?" It should be noted that were Little Bubba's lower esophageal sphincter not constantly perturbed by his incessant ingestion of brine and moonshine, two things not necessarily meant for the tango, that his diaphragm wouldn't be in a consistent state of hiccups, the mentioning of which part jackhammer demise of the presumed regroupment at foot. "Frank, huh? Worked himself into a tissy, huh? Frank, over some thick side piece, huh? Never gonna happen, Dick, huh? Is it, Frank, huh?" As Little Bubba continued with the pest on Frank and Dick, with more than a moderate Julia Child's measuring cup worth of salt, we should all bear closer witness to the two titans above the scraps. Cut 2. Per exactly that moment when the bad blood first bled. Not a week prior, when the sun were just willing to set and the hellfire heat were clipping down the tip back of a sixer in a body of water till your eyeballs brimmed yellow rimmed right, and your fingers all good barbecue crinkle fried, where Six-Finger Leander were looking forward to rectifying just that. And just as he'd parked, sat, refrigerator stacked, a set of good and frosties for him on that dark wood table that piggyback rode atop some brown shag carpet, smelling just like every butt Big Mac smacked inside that lime green $1 General ashtray, there were a rappy tap tap on the door. Enter Hand Grenade Harry, with a fresh from the daisy's glossy glow and a sack full of promises he'd every intention of not keeping, including the cut of whatever sold, and in true form hurriedly helped himself to a beer without the ask nor tell, sending Six-Finger Leander into a boiled cauldron of cracked craniums that would need dealt with soon. Amongst the many things Hand Grenade Harry had not counted on the evening he came calling on Six-Finger Leander, the primary conniving complication was the already awaiting compatriot in the back room who had a plan all their own. Winona Daly, motivated by her own compulsion and the imminent know-how that it only a matter of time before her dear husband, Hand Grenade Harry, fucked up yet again, took it upon himself to separately cast some nets, beginning with her first attempt at retribution not a day earlier, where she marched that faithless hillside down to Filthy Tom's place, dropping off a bag and a note scribbled and attached that spelled, "I'll double the trouble for the follow-through. Let's speed it up, shall we?" Lunchtime, with half the bank tellers off. Maggie makes her way back to the post-op with full-hearted Frank's words burning coal in her ears. Bag 1 goes in box 3495 XTP. Bag 2 goes, beep, this information has been removed pending a beep, outside. In a beat-to-shit Ford Explorer, the hyenas of the hill. Hand Grenade Harry, Six-Finger Leander, Little Bubba and Dirty Dick Sanders serving straight creepy crawlers at Full-Hearted Frank and the oh-shit getaway gray Ford 350 across the street. Their sight pointed to Filthy Tom and his sweaty palms manhandling 2 cases in double-digit humidity, walking into the bank with a beeline straight for thick-boned Maggie. "And the race is on, folks. The horses have hit the green." In clappity-clap back to slapstacks, the car doors open. The mask pulled down. The sudden convulsion of little Bubba's nerves rumbling that diaphragm with such taxing measure that a series of donkey ticks erupt, causing, as one can imagine, more than a polite nudge from his consigliaries, which led, unfortunately still, to yet another rebuttal by little Bubba, which forced Hand Grenade Harry to try and break up the children from play, which led to a knife, and then a billy club surreptitiously pulled from a place befitting or not befitting its holding, and then a gun, and then another gun, and then mask pulled, and then 1-on-1, then 2-on-2, cursing in the street, an altogether rather messy show of biting and kicking and fighting and licking, which was weird because there wasn't really a need for that. And it rather off-putting to the small gaggle of folks coming back to punch the clock after their midweek nourishment, you can imagine. Grown men fighting in the street, and in between the jabs and ear-pulling and the weird kitty-slapping that was happening between Dirty Dick Sanders and Full-Hearted Frank, with little paws of winded fat men unable to find their footing until, dreadfully so, little Bubba took a haymaker right to the gut, and Toddler spewed and pooped right there where he stood. It was truly god-awful. But then the slip and slide occurred from the juices. Well, at least Hand Grenade Harry got in, so there's that. However, if like me, you're in the business of not just knowing where you're feasting on, but where that feast rears its pretty head before the slaughter, the full jump-off begins a fortnight ago, where, heavily invested in the reruns of Golden Girls and everyone's favorite floozy, Blanche, Six-Finger Leander was beckoned by yet another rappy tap-tap on his door. And who, pray tell, should be waiting that other side of Trailer Park Linoleum, the going rate of services soon to be rendered, the always agreed upon 1 carton of Marlboro Reds, 1 sixer of Blue Label sodas, 1 stack of fresh from the stretch Jacksons numbering in the per head allotment of 5,000, but Filthy fucking Tom himself. Seemed Hand Grenade Harry had gotten handsy with the wrong honey, a thick little cutie pie called Maggie. And upon her confession to filthy fucking Tom with great and fastidious remorse, where words like "daddy" dripped from her lips, the proposition put in practice. And being that six-finger Leander, just as downright and dirty as filthy Tom, gave a head nod and waited for the players to come to him. For a hired hand is, after all, a hired hand. Cut to Six-finger Leander, cured and charged with the timing about right. That extra thumb of his looped in a sling of metal that's packing a supercharged long nose 41 that'd shoot the wings off a tick at 100 yards if he hadn't took no drink, which he hadn't. Not in the back and forth passage between full-hearted Frank or Dirty Dick Sanders or Little Bubba, and not in the bring the head of Alfredo Garcia glare that were kicking dirt out of Hand Grenade Harry. This and here were a measured pull out of that harness under his arm. We were known for it. It should come as no surprise that honor amongst thieves not present within this particular den, and just as Six-finger Leander went for the subtle pull-out, so too did full-hearted Frank and Little Bubba become quite feisty with each other, as the matter of cheap shots swung earlier at the bank never truly resolved. And in a dastardly derisive display of downright mean, Little Bubba popped off, which broke the chair he sat on, and hurled full on, "I'll be your huckleberry," to full-hearted Frank, with leg of said chair in his hand, and the nail therein poking loosey-goosey for all the eye to see, and pretended a particularly politicized pile drive over top him, which, had that been the end, Six-finger Leander could have very well just pulled the trigger and shot. But alas, Dirty Dick Sanders didn't care very much for the absurdest interruption to his drinking, and took what could be argued as a counterproductive approach, which resulted in the dumping of shine over top the two and the lighting of a match indoors, which clearly sent a turn in the road, for it was not Six-finger Leander's intention to handle all four of them, but the flailing fire geysers of full-hearted Frank and Little Bubba, whose, if you thought that lower esophageal sphincter sound was an issue before, well, you should hear it now. Not to mention the truly inconsiderate proximity to the fire to Six-finger Leander, that he just went ahead and, like Gary Oldman in his prime, killed everyone and left. The end.
I would love to unmute everybody's microphones because I know they're all going mad. Ashley, thank you for that. Alex Hawley would like to say, fabulous narration. Have you ever narrated an audiobook?
I am in the middle of recording Black Betty. I've also recorded a bunch of short stories and other things that can be found on my website, which will link you to the SoundCloud. So, yes.
Thank you. I think Derek has got competition for quote of the night because his reading contained profanity and falafel, but you summed up what you, Louise, Derek and Neil were like last year in Drunker Than Shit. So
yeah.
And Drunker Than Shit is getting a lot of love on the chat. People's socks have been blown off. People are just effing and blinding in the chat because they think that you're amazing. And I have to tell you that Sarah, who read for us last week, when she found out you were reading again tonight, I could see her in the little column down the side just like going wild. So Derek wants a Drunker Than Shit t-shirt, so merch for sure. I will wear it for sure. But third year in a row, thank you so much for doing that for us, and it's just a delight to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so everybody, that was the 5th virtual Noir at the Bar. As always, here's a few things to keep you busy until we reconvene next Wednesday. Tomorrow night, the 2nd virtual Noir at the Bar Edinburgh is happening, so tune into their Facebook page from 7 p.m. for a host of cracking readings. The Facebook group UK Crime Book Club is holding a mini festival this weekend with a number of panels. The big names at that one are Ellie Griffiths, Mark Billingham, Callie Taylor and William Shaw, 3/4 of whom you might be seeing at a virtual bar near you soon. This week, whatever you do, do not listen to Blood Brothers podcast, which is available from Friday. Their guest was some nutty woman who does stuff in our conservatory on a Wednesday night with a load of crime authors. Don't listen to it. They barely talk about books. Don't listen to what Rob Parker's saying in the chat. Do not listen to it. And the reason we're here tonight, Newcastle Noir is going virtual this weekend. Our lovely Dr. Noir, who joined us earlier this evening, will be shining a spotlight on several big name authors from the 1st to the 3rd of May. You can tune in using the Newcastle Noir and Newcastle Library's Facebook pages. So, quick reminder, if you haven't already entered to get free books, drop an email to that email address. Chat about us on Twitter. We are now on Twitter as well, and Facebook. It's been a busy week. Thank you so much to everybody who's joined us tonight. Thank you to all of our fantastic readers. You've all been great, and thank you so much for giving up your time to come and do this. Thank you to our chat bouncer, Nikki Black, and thank you to our wonderful Simon Buick for keeping the lights on in the bar. As I say every week, this wouldn't happen without Simon. I thought this was going to be really easy, and then within 5 minutes worked out it wasn't. So Simon helps me just crack on with the presenting, and he does everything behind the scenes, and he's amazing. As always, fantastic writers next week. Stay tuned for the link in the coming days via your newsletter, which will also contain details of our readers tonight. Let's get #drunkerthanshit trending.